Now, Randy, the only carders I've ever seen have been the paddles with the little needles sticking off so you can hand card. I've never
Right.
seen a carding machine.
Yeah, this is built just like the industrial ones, the big industrial ones in the big woolen mills. It's a continuous process. As the fiber feeds in on the feed belt, it gets put onto the main drum, and then the two small rollers that are next to each other, they're workers and strippers. One takes it off of the main drum and puts it onto the other one, and it puts it back on the drum. And each time it's starting to align the fibers more parallel with each other, as well as fluffing the fibers up even more than the picker did. This will really open up anything that's left after the picker, and as well, like I said, get the fibers more in line. When it comes off of the card, it's considered woolen, where the fibers are still crisscrossed a little bit. They're not all parallel with each other. So it's woolen coming off of the cards.
All right, what's next after the
Well,
carder?
you've got the other end of the carder. You've only seen it going in.
Yeah.
Now it's a continuous process, as we said earlier. So this side, you're gonna see the fibers as they come off. They come down onto the white belt, which carries them down through that small orifice there. It's like collects all the fibers together, and then it goes down into a rotating can that helps hold the fibers together for the next step of the process. We can also make bats like you would put in pillows or quilts. At that stage, it just comes off of that white sheet and it goes down to a rotating drum and just gathers it on a big drum instead of it being collected up and gathered into a can.
I see. Randy, tell me about these white papers that I see at each station.
Yes, each one of the machines, we put a white traveler paper with it. It tells the customer, it'll typically tell any of the information that we get, the animal type, the animal name if it has a name, and the speeds that each one of the machines are set to, so that we know the settings as far as the speed of the picker, in-feed, drum speed, the carder. It'll tell all of the different settings that it was run at. It just helps us a little bit to understand how different fibers run. Some of those same fiber types may be similar settings, but just because they're the same fiber type doesn't necessarily mean they're going to run at the same settings.
I see. So it's an ID tag too?
Yes, that stays with it from machine to machine because we have so many orders in process. It's easy to get them confused, especially if they're all white and they're all similar fiber types. It just helps us keep it straight.
So it'll travel to each station with each individual.
Yeah, that'll be, and it also is the work instructions of what they want, whether they want it back as roving or what size yarn they may want it back as, and the number of plies that it's going to be, and the form that they want to get it back, whether they want it back on cones or just traditional type skeins.
Gotcha. So this just came from the carder?
Correct. As you saw in the carder, the cans were rotating around, and it goes into the cans, and we stack the cans together, and it compresses the fiber and helps hold it together so that it can go through this next machine, which is a pin drafter. Even though you see the fibers are pretty much in line, or they appear to be in line coming from the carder, the pin drafter is even going to align the fibers more parallel with each other. So this machine does also a 5-to-1 draft. So if you've got 5 ends feeding into the machine from this side, you're going to have one end coming out this side. So it actually reduces it. That also averages the sizes because it's a little bit inconsistent coming off the carder. You never have consistent feeds all the time. So by running it through the pin drafter, it does that averaging of the size so that you get a consistent roving, especially if it's going to go to our spinner. We'll run it through here at least 3 times to get a consistent, they call it a sliver weight, coming off the pin drafter.
So this is an important time too, because this is roving, and I guess a lot of people choose to stop at this point, and maybe you send roving out to home spinners. Is that right?
Yeah, some mills you can spin it right direct from the carder in this form. We choose not to. We like to get the fibers a little bit more in line. We get a little bit a lot nicer presentation because it'll be in a nice even coil, be a consistent size. But you could hand spin it at this point.
But it's best after the pin drafter.
Correct. We choose to run it through the pin drafter. So everything we do that goes back as roving is going to go through this machine at least once, and usually twice even for hand spinning, just to get the fibers nice and straight.
Okay.
This is the inside of the pin drafter right here, and they call it a pin drafter because you can see all these fine pins, and there's a set of, they're called falls. There's a set of these falls on the top as well as a set of falls on the bottom. The top ones rotate around one way, the bottom ones are rotating the other way, and when it gets closed down together, it'll actually capture the fiber. They'll intertwine the top falls with the bottom ones, and it actually does a 5-to-1 draft, so it's going to actually pull the fibers between these pins, helping to align the fibers more parallel yet.
Okay, Randy, tell us what we're seeing here.
Okay, you saw the pin drafter, and it's actually like two machines in one. The pin drafter presents the fiber to the coiler, which finishes it off into a form that you can continue to move around the mill. As you can see here, it's the same thing, but now what it's done is it's put it in a continuous coil so that it can either be hand spun, as you said earlier, you can hand spin it from this, or it's going to go to our spinner and also spin it from the, it's called a sliver or roving.
Okay, we've brought the roving over here to the table and measured out 10 yards of roving. You always measure out 10 yards.
Yes,
correct?
Our formulas are based on a 10-yard sample. So the 10 yards of roving will weigh it. This particular 10 yards weighs 0.3 ounces.
You can tell that just by holding it.
No, we actually use a digital scale, but it is pretty light. This is a fairly springy fiber. It's a wool, so it has a lot of spring to it. So we're going to have to run a fairly small sliver weight to get it to spin to the correct yarn size. Okay. We're going to process this down into a 3-ply sport weight is what the customer wants. And then this is going to be presented to the spinner. It's going to come out of the coils just as it come off of the pin drafter.
Okay.
It's going to go up over the top of our heads.
Right.
And it's going to come down into the spinner right over in this area. You can see where the fibers are going to get pulled down through. And when we did that weight, we actually determined what gears we were going to use to set the ratio between the speed of this shaft and this top shaft to determine the right size that's going to come out as finished yarn. And this creates your single ply of yarn. And then it comes down and it gets spun onto the bobbins, and the bobbins have what's called a builder, so it just gradually just goes up and down as the bobbin spins, and the bobbin is actually going to put the amount of twist in to get the right amount to hold the yarn together. And there again, we have another set of gears that we put on to determine how much twist it's going to put in based on the fiber types. Okay, this customer wants a 3-ply sport weight yarn. So to determine that, what we do is I'll ply 3 strands of the single ply from the spinner back together manually, just so that I know what we're actually going to end up with. And then we use what's called wraps per inch. So I gently just wrap it around this dowel with the yarn just gently touching to generate the number of wraps per inch. And then you just continue to wrap it up for a whole inch, or there's a 1/2 inch mark on there. And then you just count the number of wraps that it is within that set period of time, or that set amount. And then you just determine the inch mark and the number of times it took to cover that, and that gives you your wraps per inch. There's no standard setting for a double knit yarn being so many wraps per inch. They refer to it as yards per pound, but different fibers have different weights.
Sure.
So that's why we chose to go with wraps per inch.